Hello, and welcome to today's special briefing on the future of work in a new distributed virtual environment. I'm Brian Stafford, CEO of Diligent, and your host for the session today. As leaders around the world navigate the next chapter of the pandemic recovery, we know how valuable it is to hear how others are tackling these complex issues and how you can inform your own organization's approach. According to a survey we recently published between the Diligent Institute and Corporate Board Member Magazine, when evaluating the future of work, board members say the single most important internal element of their companies in considering how to return back to work is first corporate culture and followed secondly by productivity levels. You can read more about our findings from the Diligent Institute at diligent.com, but I'm honored to have Satya Nadella and Carmine Sibio join us to expand upon these themes and share more about their respective approaches. As CEOs of two of the most influential and respected organizations in the world, I expect we'll all learn a lot and can better contribute to the conversations inside each of our organizations. Thank you again for joining us, and now I'd like to hand it over to our moderator, Betsy Atkins.
Thank you, Brian Stafford, and thank you, Diligent, for hosting us. I'm Betsy Atkins, and I'm our moderator today. I'm a serial entrepreneur and a public company director. And I have the pleasure of hosting our guests, CEO of Ernst & Young, Carmine Sibio, and Microsoft CEO, Satya Nadella. Our topic is, what does the future of work look like? Well, it has certainly been a unique year looking back. It's been unusual and unique for boards of directors, CEOs, and society as a whole. We've been tested, we've been challenged, and we've been resilient. There have been some silver linings. For many companies, they feel they've accelerated their digital transformation by as much as 5 years. And many companies have performed very well. But we are still faced with the decision of what should our return to work model be? Should we be 100% remote, 100% return, or a hybrid model? Well, there's a lot of survey data, and it's been all over the place. And how we felt 2 months ago is very different than how we felt last month from how we feel today. We're coming through the fear phase when almost half of us have at least had our first vaccine, and we can think about return to work from the point of view of safety. We've also seen work from home show us some different insights. For example, our specific work team has become very close-knit together, but they've been remote and siloed from the rest of the corporation. There's been a great article by the Harvard Business Review that talks about how the social network has gotten weak. The social network is really important. It's how we pass our culture, how we onboard people, how we mentor people, and how we actually get people to understand our vision and mission and stay connected to our company. And as a result, in this past year, we've had pretty high turnover. The social network is also part of how we ideate and innovate and problem solve. And it's a big part of how our employees get their psychic and their emotional paycheck. When we think about the return to work model, there's some different choices. Some companies say maybe half of the employees will come in for part of the week. Another company, a big pharma, has said they're going to bring all of the employees back 100%. They're going to do a reset together, and then they'll decide what is the right hybrid model. Well, I think it's time for us to hear from our panelists and hear their thoughts. Hello, Satya. Thank you for being with us, and we're going to start with you today. In remote work, how has digital transformation accelerated, and what tools has Microsoft created and introduced to help us with productivity?
No, thank you so much, Betsy and Carmine. It's great to be with you. When it comes to remote work, the thing that has really changed how we even conceptualize what does remote work look like is on 3 dimensions, I would say. One is on collaboration. For example, one of the key things that we've had to do is, it's not as if work only happens during video meetings. Work happens before meetings, during meetings, and after meetings. So we had to bring people across all of what they do together so that they can complete their work and be productive. One of the other things also is it's not everybody's remote. In fact, if anything, if you look at retail or healthcare and other, manufacturing, people have been on the front lines. But it also means that some of the people in the headquarters may be working from home. So you needed to bridge the knowledge workers talking to the frontline workers. And in fact, we've seen amazing use cases where people are using things like HoloLens in the field, while at the same time having an engineer working from home holographically essentially be present, helping the technician fix some complex piece of equipment. So collaboration has changed. Learning is another aspect, Betsy, is just changed because you really, we've continued to build knowledge capital inside and to drive productivity. And it's happened because we were able to discover people who have expertise and connect with them, or just learning content came to us as part of the workflow. So learning and how companies think about learning and driving knowledge capital and productivity has changed. And the last thing is well-being, because one of the issues is, as somebody said, this remote work, I don't know whether I'm working from home or I'm sleeping at work. And so the transitions are hard. And so you need real data that then can be used by you individually to ensure your own well-being. And then managers need that because they want to be able to care for the employees. So I would say these are the three dimensions in which work has drastically changed. And I think we've all learned how to still maintain high levels of productivity, collaboration, learning, and well-being.
And how about the employee experience and some of the productivity tools that you're going to introduce? Can you share a little bit about that?
In our case, to us, Teams obviously has gone from, I would say one of the tools to the most essential tool of what we describe as Microsoft 365. And as I said earlier, it's not just about meetings, but it is about the entirety of how people work before, during, and after meetings. And so that has been perhaps one of the biggest breakthroughs, but it's just not, the things that we are also launching is something called Viva, or it's the experience cloud essentially from Microsoft, where we are in fact taking some of the other broader concepts of productivity, like learning, like knowledge and well-being, and bringing that, and communication and connection, because one of the challenges all of us have had as companies is in a highly dispersed remote workforce, how do you keep that focus on the mission and culture and connectivity between managers and leaders and the employees? And so we're also very excited about the launch of Viva, which I think will help anyone with the employee experience much more holistically.
Carmine, are you seeing a big change in digital transformation in your clients and in your business?
Betsy, it's great to be here as well. And hello, Satya. Absolutely. We have, we've done a CEO survey that's very recent, and 70% of the companies are accelerating their digital transformation. And I think if there's one thing the pandemic has showed us is that you have to be digital in today's world. And I've said this before, when we looked at our clients, only 25% of our clients had digitized supply chain before the pandemic. And obviously now they're realizing that they have to change their supply chains. They have to do a lot more in terms of digital transformation. In terms of just technology in general, first of all, I have to thank Satya because we're one of the users of Teams, and we had a few hundred people on it prior to the pandemic and went to 300,000 within a month around the world. And it's really saved us because the collaboration tool is excellent and it's obviously needed. I do think, as we go forward, it's so important that digital transformation continues. I think every company's on this. We did, in our survey, one of the things that was interesting was that of the CEOs, only 34% said that their clients trust them with data. So the trust part around data is a factor, and it's certainly a factor in terms of digitizing anything. So I do think there's a lot more work to do in terms of data and the trust factor around data, and that's going to be important going forward in any kind of digital world. But the short answer is absolutely that's the case, Betsy. And I would also just pile on, Satya, some of your software going forward around learning and so forth, and technology is incredibly important. what we are seeing now is that the workforce going forward is incredibly important, and it's going to be a couple years of really boom years, and retaining, upskilling your workforce, recruiting is incredibly important. And, I might say it's the year of the CHRO, because I think that's going to be the difference between a successful company and a company that's not successful.
I think you're right. When you look at different industries, Carmine, how have different industries adapted, and what are the differences you've seen in remote work by industry?
Well, Betsy, that's an interesting question, because I think things have evolved over the last 12 months. There was a point in time where, basically a lot of the tech companies, and Satya could attest to this, was saying more of, well, we can do everything virtually. We don't have to have people back and so forth. But now that people are feeling more safe, and I do think that's a factor, because as people are being vaccinated, people do feel more safe and they feel like they want to be with other people. It's human nature. So I think the mentality is changing a little bit. And then also, you could talk about things like how important it is to culture, how important it is to innovation, for people to be together physically. So you will see more. And interestingly, I'm based in New York, and I just visited our new offices in New York, and they were telling me who the tenants are in Manhattan, who's leasing a lot of the space. And actually, a lot of the biggest leasers of space are the tech companies, Facebook and Google and so forth. So there is now, some of that might have been pre-pandemic, but some of it was during pandemic. So I do think now almost all the sectors are realizing that they do need people back in the office. The office might be very different. It's going to be a lot more around collaboration and so forth, and using a lot of the tools that Satya and Microsoft are developing. But I think there's been a turn versus maybe some of the rhetoric 4 or 5 months ago, in my view.
Satya, do you think that we're able to innovate, ideate, problem solve as well in remote work? And how do you think about it in a hybrid environment?
Yeah, no, when I look at some of the productivity stats and innovation stats, even patents, if that's one of the proxies, they've not been bad. I mean, in some sense, one could even say they've been good. But sometimes I think in the data that you capture, it's hard to sort of really think about that creative capital. How do ideas even get formed? What is, after all, the theory of the firm? It's about that serendipitous sort of way for people to be able to come together. So I think that what we are going to do going forward in hybrid work is perhaps, not be constrained as we are today, learn from some of the things, like especially flexibility, because after all, both consumer behavior and employee expectations have changed. That means we as employers have to really be much more flexible in where they work, what times they work, and which place they work in. And so that's kind of what we are trying to do even at Microsoft, Betsy, is just come up with a policy framework subject to, in fact, team norms, because I think different countries will have different norms, different functions will have different norms. And even in time, 1 year after the pandemic or 2 years, it'll be different than what we may do in the first year. So accounting for all of that, we have created, I would say, a lot more flexibility in our processes. And we're making adjustments a little bit to Carmine's point about the place, right? I don't think we're going to have conference room settings like the way they were before. In fact, conference room settings will be such that people are in the conference room and remote participants. And we want to where's the camera? How is the sound? Can the people who are remote see everyone and identify everyone? Those will all be real considerations. We're building the technology and the physical layout, if you will, to make sure that you can have very effective connections. And lastly, I would even say the operating model and the technology, right? So for example, at least in the first parts when we come back, I think people will want to know how many people can, in fact, be in a conference room. So you'll need, again, applications to allow for us to be able to maintain some of the social distancing and the norms about who can be where and how many can be at a given place and what have you. So it's about process of people, process, place, and technology.
So it's all obviously going to evolve and move and change as we all reach a point of safety and confidence. But everybody is struggling with the same thing of where are you in your policy? They're all trying to ask themselves that same question. Knowing that it's fluid, are there some things you can share with how you're thinking about your policy going forward?
Yeah, so what we did was on the 3 policies we set was the easiest one is, I would say, time, right? After all, 9 to 5 was never perhaps true. And so we said now, again, subject to individual manager feedback and approval, people can have more flexibility in time. And that, I think, is something that, for example, I would say even in the workplace, childcare and all of what happens around, anyone who needs more flexibility for a particular period of time, I think that awareness now is universal. So there's no going back, and we're all better off for that. So time is one thing that we'll have more flexibility. And another area would be place. Do I work from home on a given day or of half a day or what have you? Even there, again, subject to an individual manager approval, we're creating more flexibility. The place where we have centralized a little more is the actual site. So for example, should I work in Seattle or should I move to Denver? That decision is a little more complicated because it does have long-term implications. There are implications on taxation. There are implications on economic opportunity or opportunities for career advancement, depending on what happens in the labor market and even our internal labor market. So therefore, that's something we have centralized a little more. But we have created, I would say, the key word is being flexibility, and team norms. So instead of trying to be dogmatic that we have found a given future, we're trying to make sure there's a lot more flexibility for team norms to even emerge.
Carmine, how are you thinking about your policy as it evolves, and knowing that it's early days still? Do you have a few thoughts you could share?
Sure, Betsy. I think, look, the critical word here is flexibility, as Satya said. And we were very flexible before the pandemic. I usually give this stat. In our biggest building in New York, in Times Square, we had 12,000 people tagged to the space. The space held 5,500 people. On any given day, we'd have 4,500 people in the space. On Fridays, it was more like 3,000. And so, where were the people? They were at clients. They were working from home. They were traveling. So we've always had a very flexible environment, and that will continue for us. Our default in the U.S. is still right now work from home, even though our offices are pretty much all open, but they're at very low capacity. So I'll give you a few anecdotal points. One of the things that's interesting is that I was in our San Francisco office actually yesterday, and there were very few people in the office. Now, the city is very quiet, and it was hard to even find a place to get a coffee. So some of this, it's a little bit chicken or the egg. We need people back, so the whole city then comes back and so forth. And so the other interesting piece, as I was told yesterday in San Francisco, and this is true in New York as well, is that even some people that have ventured back to the office, when they see that there aren't many people there, then they're like, well, what am I doing here? I might as well just work from home. So this is going to go through a transition phase, in my view, in the next 3 to 4 months in terms of getting people back. And I actually think, and we have this ability in our new offices, I actually think it's better if you can get people back in bigger quantities, like at once, versus this trickling. Because I think people will feel like, hey, they really are with other people and so forth and so on. But you also have to make sure you test all your protocols, which which might make that more difficult. But I think it'll be a different feeling from a people perspective. So one of the items that I heard that was very interesting on just this transition phase, and Satya, maybe you've heard this as well, is one company is going to experiment. There's this whole obviously conversation going on vaccination in terms of, do you really really push for people to be vaccinated? Do you not? And this one company is thinking of basically saying, if you're vaccinated, you work on floor 3, and therefore you don't have to wear a mask. If you're not vaccinated, you work on floor 4, and you have to wear a mask, and so forth and so on. And it's a way to incent employees to get back in the office and not have to wear a mask if you're vaccinated. And now some of this has to go through the rules and the state rules and so forth. But it's interesting because I do think one of the items people coming back is they want to be able to be back in the offices, and they don't really want to wear a mask all day. That's not necessarily a lot of fun. So I thought that was an interesting idea that's coming out of one of our clients.
When you look at the models people are talking about where half of the organization comes back for part of the week, does that really accomplish the goal of re-knitting and rebuilding sort of the social network and the social fabric?
Yeah.
What you think?
Well, I think that's going to be the trick. And I think, as Satya said, flexibility is going to be the trick. But how you actually bring, I've had comical conversations with CEOs of our clients where it's like, we're going to a hybrid model, 3 days a week in the office, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we'll reduce our cost. Well, that doesn't really work. So you have to be organized a little bit different. And I think, there's ways of doing it with groups, with teams, that you can do that, and people will feel like they're part of the team that's in the office, and so forth. So there is ways of doing it. We haven't worked that all through, but I think it comes back to flexibility. And you will always have some people that will be at home. That's why I do think that technology in these meeting rooms, whatever they are, is going to be important.
Satya, let me ask you a question. When you look forward, what does work look like in the future? And what research trends are you seeing?
Yeah, I think when we think about work going forward, the fundamental change that I think is going to be about is, how does one define productivity? And I'd sort of referenced this a little while earlier when we were talking about how does collaboration and the nature of collaboration change? How does learning and learning on the job change? How can we even improve the ability, that feedback cycle between what does the job require in terms of skills? How does one acquire those skills, even get credentials that are marketable? That feedback loop, I think that's going to be fundamentally different, and well-being. So that's, I think, the biggest shift that we're all going to see is work going forward will not just be measured in narrow output sense, but it's going to be measured by looking at how is the social capital being built through collaboration. How is knowledge capital being built where the organization is continuously learning? And then how is the wellness of the people and their ability to participate and regenerate, I think, is going to be all first class. It's just not something that's after the fact, but it's going to be something that'll be mainstream.
Thank you both. I really feel our audience has gained some great insights and valued your thoughts, and we're appreciative of the time you've given us today.
Deeply appreciated, Betsy. It's great seeing you, Carmine.
Great seeing both of you. Thank you.
As we think about return to work, many companies were already on the path of partial virtual work. We've outsourced our payroll, accounts payable, sometimes even the call center. And some companies were having employees in the summer, for example, work from home on Fridays. So we've been making some progress in that way. But the real question is, have we been productive? And how do you measure productivity? Well, you measure productivity depending on your industry. So for example, if you're a manufacturing company, it might be the number of units manufactured. Services company, it could be the number of calls your call center handled. If you're a software company, the number of lines of software code you've written or patents received. But that doesn't tell the whole story. How do we innovate and create? And what's the framework for that? Our historic framework has always been, we get in a room together, we go to the whiteboard, we peel the onion, we stress test each other's logic and ideas, and we keep ideating till we get to that moment of insight or genius when we solve a problem or create a product. How does that translate in a virtual world? We've had some tools and they've been really helpful. Microsoft, for example, has allowed our work groups to be productive. We have HR tools that have told us about our employees' sentiment, and even a digital whiteboard tool. So when we think about things, what else have we learned in this past year? Well, we've automated a lot of our business processes. We've used artificial intelligence and machine learning, robotic process automation to automate certain processes. And in fact, it may even free up some of our human capital, our employees, to do new jobs. But what is the right peer that we should look at when we think about return to work? Is Facebook or is Twitter the right peer if we're a manufacturing company or a services company? Who should we look at and how should we think about it? Well, I think we should look almost like a pyramid holistically. We should think about first, at the top of the pyramid, what's the health, the vibrancy, and the innovation of our enterprise? Because the enterprise has to be healthy for everything to work. And then in the middle of the pyramid, our work groups, the supply chain group, the R&D group, the marketing group, where units of work are often done in teams in the middle. And of course, the critical and very important foundation and strength of our whole organization, our employees. So we have to consider the return to work model in light of everything holistically. And then we have to decide what is right for our unique culture and company. Every company is different, and the answer is going to be different based on your company. But whatever that answer is, we have to communicate it with clarity and transparency. We need to motivate and reinvigorate our employees. We have to bring them back to those magic moments together and reignite the energy and engagement to return in whatever return to work model that we pick for our company. I know everyone here is going to make the right decision, and I want to thank you for your time today. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.